Hey there, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Peep Into Education. My name is Kylie Elizabeth, also known as the Virtual Educator. And on today's episode, I have special guest Tawana Wiggins, who is coming from North Carolina. Tawana is a passionate educator. She does strategic development consulting for mothers, and she is the CEO of TL Collaborative. She's a former educator, a mother, and a grandmother. So I'm really excited to talk to Tawana today. We're going to go over a little bit about family engagement, social emotional learning, and school structures, and just a little bit else of whatever comes out of our conversation, per usual, as we do on Peep Into Education. So I'm excited to introduce Tawana. I'm going to have her come on, and she's going to introduce a little bit about herself and her educational background, and give us some context into her as an educator, and then we'll talk into our topics of conversation for today. So thank you so much, Tawana, for joining us, and feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Kylie. Thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure and an honor to be on here talking about something that I am so passionate about, which is education. And so, yes, I've been in education for the past 20 years, and I've done everything in education from school counseling, substitute teaching. I taught middle school and high school science, as well as was the curriculum developer for an entire high school for all content, assistant principal, and then I was the chief operating officer for one of the largest charter schools here in North Carolina, running everything from finances to operations to human resources. And then I've left education and started my own organization. And so in that, I still do a form of teaching, but now it looks different. So I'm really excited to dive into this conversation with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I definitely love to ask, my guests, what brought you to the world of education, or what moment, led you into this field, and where did that start from? And so is it, a family member experience at school, or you just kind of fell into it? So what is your experience there?
Yeah. If I would glean back into my childhood, I could give you the magic answer and say I was always supposed to be an educator because that's what I wanted to be when I was a kid. I would take all my stuffed animals home, and in my day, we had diddles. They weren't called copies, they were called diddles. And I took all those home at the end of the school year, and I would teach my stuffed animals. I wanted to play school, but I didn't look at that as that's what I was supposed to be or what I wanted to do. I took an entirely different route, went to counseling, as well as went to corporations, organizations, things of that nature. And I fell into education as far as a teacher by accident. When I moved to North Carolina, I was finishing my degree in business to run an organization with my husband at the time. And I decided to substitute teach so that I can have the same schedule as my children while I was finishing my degree. And I absolutely loved it and realized that it was something that came natural, was something I was very passionate about. And from there, the position was offered to me to come back, and I switched my entire educational structure from business to education. I had a bachelor's degree in psychology, but I switched my master's, ended up getting 2 masters in education and a doctorate in education. And it was like, I didn't think I was going to be here. But I was. So
Nice. And what is your doctorate focused in your master's, if you don't mind me asking?
my master's is in education as far as K-8, I'm sorry, elementary education. And then my second master's is in school administration. And then my doctorate's in education technology.
I'm taking notes. I always have to remind myself I'm taking notes. So I look down a lot. So I like to remind people that's what I'm doing. So thank you. So definitely going through a doctoral program. I've talked through a couple people around that topic, and I don't want to go too deep into that, but I just want your opinion. Do you find the doctoral degree important in education in relation to the work that you were doing around education technology, or just in general? I always kind of wonder that, because it's something that I'm interested in myself, in adding a doctoral degree to my titles.
That's a fine line question.
Mm-hmm.
As an educator, I think it's a good thing to get as much knowledge as you can,
Yeah.
especially if that's something that you love to do. Um, just being really real, is it something that you need to have?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like, you know how most states that you need to have your master's to teach is because that's the requirement. But when it comes to, you know, having titles, it's your experience is what's going to get you through the door. Now, when you leave education and you have a doctoral degree, then that most definitely will be highlights across your name and things of that nature. But I say that if you have the mental capacity, if you have the fortitude, if you have the finances, and that's just something that you're passionate about wanting to do, then I would encourage anyone to do it.
Right.
But if it's just something like I just have it because that I would say don't put yourself through that mental anguish if you're just doing it because you feel like you have to.
Right, right. That mental part. That was the big topic of discussion in one of my podcasts. I'm generally interested for myself, and so that's a good words of wisdom. So thank you for sharing that. So when we were talking a little bit earlier, I really like that you discussed, you having like a superpower of being an educator in so many different experiences, but as a both a mother and a grandmother, as well as an educator, and all the different roles that you have. Like, why do you call it that? Like, why do you say that? Like, why do you say that you have a superpower, and like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So, just to put things into context, I am a mom, but I'm a mom of three different generations. My oldest daughter is a millennial. She's 27 years old. My son is a Gen Z. He's 24. And then my youngest is an alpha. She's 9. And so I parented three different generations of children. My first two knew me as an actual teacher. I was in the classroom when they were younger. In fact, I taught my son. He was in my 8th grade class.
Nice.
And then my youngest daughter, she's only known me as an administrator and now and a business owner. And so I've had the vantage point of seeing education from the viewpoint of a parent,
Mm-hmm.
from the viewpoint of being the teacher parent. Like I said, I taught my own kid, as well as then being a school administrator, running a school, operating a school, and then going outside of the actual instructional component and going to the operations space. Whenever I'm making decisions or I'm thinking, I'm always thinking from all of those things. Nothing ever separates. So I'm thinking about when I think about a superpower, I'm thinking about when decisions are being made, how is it affecting the parent, the household, the child? Because I I made a lot of changes in my instructional practices as my children were going through school and as I was even my son's mother, I was always his mother, his teacher, because I realized, oh wait, this is how this affects our household, and we're not, you know, a prototype, or you know, we're not an anomaly. So this is also how it affects other families. So I need to make some adjustments because this doesn't work for us. So I know it's not working for someone else. And so having that vantage point as a
Yeah.
parent teacher, and then a principal when I had a kid in school, making those decisions from that perspective of what does a school look like then as a teacher as well. What does that look like as a teacher? Like when the decisions are being made, how does that affect the classroom? How does that affect the teacher? And then zooming the lens all the way out as a school, actually operating a school, making those decisions and keeping all of those things in mind. That
Yeah.
is a superpower because not a lot of people get to have that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think too, for me, I've always been an educator, a teacher with my kids. And I too had the opportunity to be my own child's teacher in a small micro school setting a couple of years ago during the pandemic. And even as an administrator and kind of as a state level administrator, understanding policies that do in turn affect my kids in their schools and in their districts. So it is a unique perspective for us to be educators and parents at the same time. And I don't know about you, but for me, when I see my kids struggling in certain areas or just things that they refuse to do, or if they're, my son, causes a little bit of trouble at school, and it's kind of like, I'm a teacher, like don't embarrass me type of thing. It's kind of like, okay, there's a fine line of being that teacher versus the parent to them. And how has your experience been with your own children, kind of with those lines of, am I parenting them or being their teacher?
Yeah.
And do they switch those roles on and off with you throughout the years?
Well, that's a fun question. With my daughter, I remember her when she was in 8th grade. She was actually in the same school I was in as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I taught 8th grade, and so that was my team. We had pods, and there were 4 pods, and she was on a different team. But I always told the teacher, my team, like, please don't give my kid any special privileges. You treat them
Mhm.
just like anyone else. But what I do ask is that you give me the respect of, giving me a heads up. Like if she's doing something, just give me a heads
Right.
up. I don't want any surprises. Like we're colleagues, so do that. But
Right.
I also taught my kids, like, I don't want any surprises. Don't let the teacher be the only person to give me the heads up. You need to
Right.
tell me too, because know that they're going to tell me. But my older children, for the most part, never really gave me many problems in school. We had anything like that. What I would remember though is um, we would send home permission slips or things to do, and my kids were always the one that never turned theirs in because I forgot. I was like, oh shoot, I did send these home for the kids, and I'm hounding these kids to bring this back, and I didn't bring mine back. Like,
Yeah.
oh crap. Like I forgot about that. That was one thing. My son, him actually being in my class, was a joy because I didn't have to take off to see certain things. Even them both
Mhm.
being in the same school, I was right there. I can see the things that they were doing, the performances. My son is gifted and talented, and so it was him and another kid that was always neck and neck with everything. And so it was their work that if I'm grading work and people are getting it wrong and didn't hit until they got it wrong, and I said, "Oh wait, let me go back and look at everybody's again and see. Oh, you know what? I see a different
Yeah.
perspective." And then my oldest two children also were they were the sounding board. Like if I was developing a new lesson or something, I would say, "How does this sound?" And it was very good too because I've never disclosed anything to my son, him being in my class, so he didn't have any inside information, and everyone understood that it was very
Sure.
integral. But I would run like I was a rapping teacher, so I was like, I'm gonna do a song like this, and they'd be like, oh God. But they were like, okay, I think that would be cool.
Yeah.
But then my youngest daughter, like again, she was in the school that I was in when I was an administrator, and we were for her beginning years in two separate buildings. It was a K-12 school. It is a K-12 school, and so by her being elementary, I was in high school. It was separate. But she would get. They would be really strict with her because they felt like because she's an administrator's kid, she should know better. And I had to always explain to them that does not matter. She doesn't come with the superpower because I'm an administrator. She's still a kid. And then when I moved
Yeah.
into the actual building she was in, that was our central building when I became chief operating officer, I had made the decision before that to move her to another school because we needed to have separate identities. She needed to be able
Mhm.
to be a kid and have her own life and her own stuff and not be tied to that's the school, you know, district office's daughter or whatever, and all of those things. And so that was a challenge in making that decision too, because I felt like people wouldn't think I believed in our mission because my
Right.
kid doesn't go there, but I had to do what was best for my child and our household so that she could have some separation. And
Mhm.
that my youngest child, she's the one who's the trier. And so there were times when I'm like, you are why would you do this? And
Mhm.
she had because she only knew me as an administrator, she had no chill, if you will, when it came to stuff. She would just look at me like people were like, are you Miss Wiggins' daughter? And she's like, how do you know her? And they're like, she's the principal. And she would just be like, I would be like, if I were you, the stuff that you do sometimes, I'd be like, I have no idea who that is. I'm not related to that
Right.
person. You just
Right.
are like, yeah, like no problem.
That's hilarious. That's so good. I definitely related to some of that, and for sure, it's definitely unique. So for those that are watching who's had that experience to have your own children, like in your educational setting, I think it's definitely fun, but at the same time, it was super challenging because my at the time my son was in kindergarten too, kind of in the next door class when we were doing these pods and he just always wanted to come next door. Mom, like, come talk to me. Like, no, I'm not mom today. Like, just I'm teacher right now. So it's definitely a fine line. So it's really interesting. But I think too, kids get our kids get a different perspective of us too as being an educator and hopefully learning from us that yes, we're teaching others, but this stuff is just as important for you too. So I really try to emphasize that with my own children. Like, hey, like, please listen to what I'm trying to say. Like, I do know some things that I'm talking about, but I also try to like leave them be and let them be independent. But I think for me, my biggest my biggest issue is, and I'm that parent that's kind of late to drop off, but that's only because I'm a 30-minute drive and Arizona traffic is not very nice at 8 in the morning. So yeah, so my kid's school, I'm so sorry. I am that parent that's a few minutes late quite frequently, but I'm kind of embarrassed for that, but it's okay. Okay, thank you for
My
sharing.
daughter would actually say to me, like sometimes she would say, with my youngest one, I would be like, I remember one time she said when she was in, before she started school, she was at daycare. She's like, "You're not a teacher." I'm like, "Yes, I am." She goes, "No, you're not. You're a principal." I'm like, "It's the same thing." And
Oh,
then she would even say, like, when she comes home and she tells me stuff now, like if she's doing her work and I'm like, "No, you can put it on this side or you can do that or it's okay, but, or you have to write a little darker or don't write like the things that I know not to
hmm
do or the things that I know, like, oh, the teacher will be fine. It's understood." She goes, "No, you can't." I'm like, I,
hmm
I know,
yeah.
I know how to do it.
I know, or it's like the teaching methods, and it's like you're trying to like math. I'm like, oh, let me show you this way
Yeah.
because I think you'll understand, but this way. And my son's adamant, like, no, I didn't learn that way. I can't do it this. And I'm just like, okay, like I'm not gonna fight the teacher. Let you do what you want, and well, maybe we'll figure it out later. So
She'll be like,
it's
I do know.
yeah. Yep, it's so fun. Okay, so I think with before we get into you discussing a little bit about your business and what you're doing there, I'm wondering with all of the years that you've had in education, and in those multiple roles and within the classroom or within your administrative roles, what are some like trends that you noticed, or things that even between your three generations of your children, like what is the common theme or areas of concerns that you've witnessed within your years of education, either with students or any stakeholder in the educational world? Like, what have you noticed, I guess, over the years?
Yeah. One major concern that I have is as an educator, a parent, and just noticing the thing that hasn't changed is education. And we've changed everything else. Our cell phones have changed, our televisions have changed, the way that we meet have changed, but the way that
Mhm.
we educate has not.
Right.
And that's very concerning to me. I principled through the pandemic, and so being right in the midst of seeing those evolutional changes in the way that children behave, the way that they think, and us not changing in evolution the way that we teach is concerning. When I was in the classroom in 2011, um, that's when YouTube first became a thing, right? And one of my students was a YouTuber. She started YouTube channels and she became locally syndicated. Now she's nationally syndicated and all the things. But during that time, I was recording my lessons and like putting them on Microsoft. So that, and my goal with that was I realized that some kids, when they were absent from school, I didn't have time to re-get them this information. I taught a tested subject. I taught science. And I'm like, I don't have time to get this back to them. How can I, and my classes are really engaging and we do labs. And so I started recording them and putting them on Microsoft. But then I
hmm
realized not everyone can access Microsoft. Some people, their computers aren't accessing it or their iPads. I mean, not iPads, their iPods. I'm
hmm
dating myself now, right? And so she was doing these YouTube channels. And when I ask this question now, it seems like if someone's listening to this from this era, they're like, what? You're archaic. But I was like, can the YouTube, that's how I asked, can the YouTube be accessed? Can it be accessible to everyone? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, really? Teach me this.
Yeah.
And so she taught me how to put my videos on YouTube. And so I became an asynchronous classroom well before the pandemic happened. Um, and then I would put them on my website so that students were, if they were absent, they could access them. And I kind of did like taught them the flipped classroom method before flipped classroom was a thing.
hmm
I told them, like, if you miss the class, then you can always watch it there. I talked to the camera as the students. If I was absent, that's what I did for my substitute lesson. I pre-recorded it, and
Nice.
those types of things. And then they knew, like, if we were doing a lab, I'm like, you're going to get all of the labbing, but then it's going to be your responsibility for the conclusions and the analysis of data and things of that nature. And I taught them. My notes were set up as a study guide. So I'm like, this is also for those who are in the classroom. If you are in the classroom but you're studying, you take a blank note because that sheet is also on the website, and then you watch the lesson and you see if you can fill in the blanks, or you fill in the blanks and you see if you can check the lesson so that you get your answers. Now that was something that was innovative
hmm
pre-pandemic, and that was something that that's how I operated my school during the pandemic. But it's
Yeah.
sad to see that as I look at different schoolings, my daughter has been to different ones. And then also, being friends with colleagues, being friends with other administrators, and then visiting several schools and seeing that that has not changed. Like we went back to the way we were doing it pre-pandemic,
Hmm.
and kids, me being a science teacher, you realize that whenever there's an environmental change, there's a biological change as well.
Hmm.
And children experience, and people, not just children, but the people, the teachers, administrators, everyone, their parents experience a biological change on how we process information, how we interact, and how we engage. But we've not done anything in the classroom to shift that
Right.
on a wide, some places that are doing some things, but we've not done it in a wide perspective to understand that because kids are back in school does not
Right.
mean everything's okay.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. And I definitely, too, have, part of the generation that's been through all the shifts of technology and like the different access points and things like that. And I find that interesting too to have already been on YouTube right before that was like really a thing. Did you find it an issue as you were recording and using your YouTube channel for your substitute lessons, like for the students to access it at the schools? Because I know a lot of schools, don't allow certain YouTube channels or don't allow YouTube even through the school domain. Were there ever like any bumps in the road with that?
And with the school that I was at when I first started doing it was a very affluent school, and so I did it, and I was one of the technologically advanced teachers. Like I was the first one to get a smart
Hmm.
board, that I trained all the staff on the smart board, all of
Yes.
those things. And so because of that, I had a little more access to things
Sure.
than other people did because of what I was doing, and what I needed and what I was able to show to do with it. And so our school was opened up to some areas. And this was, again, when YouTube first became a thing. And so they didn't start locking down things. And
Yeah.
then they started, but then because I was already doing something, I was able to say, well, this is how we need to do this because they need to access these things. When I moved to a different school, so I was a teacher in the school that I ended up being a principal for. Before being a principal, I was a teacher. And I came because I had access in one place. I didn't realize that was not the norm in other
Right.
places. And so I
Yeah.
get to the other school and I'm just ready to, execute my lessons and do all the things. And I'm realizing, oh, I hit a roadblock. I can't do some things because I didn't have a dot cam. I didn't have a smart board. I didn't have like a bunch of stuff. So I had to improvise. I was setting my phone up like with a stick, and I was doing
Mhm.
things so that I was just trying to like do a whole bunch of things just to like set things up. I was like, well, do you have a math dot cam? I can use that, and all of the things I was used to my students seeing what I was doing and all of the things. And so that was a real big barrier.
Yeah.
And being able to, break those barriers and do something different was another learning experience for students to be able to have a be an experiential learning experience, because that was something that they never had before. But then
Right.
also was eye opener to the administrators before me to see like, oh wait, this is you. We could do it like this, and I had to be able to say, yes, you could do
Yeah.
these things, and then moving into the administrative role, knowing what I needed for my staff to be able to teach in a different way. Those were things that I was able to leverage my leadership to make sure that my school was set in a position that was, because we keep saying 21st century learning, 21st century learning. And I'm like, really? Because we're about to be out of the 21st century
Oh,
very soon and going
right.
into another century, and we still
Yeah.
not doing 21st century learning. That
I
doesn't just mean
agree.
computer classroom.
Right. I definitely agree. And it's so funny. I've talked on that before, and it's like, these kids definitely have a lot more access to things now. And obviously schools are trying to adapt to the technology changes that are always changing all the time. And I definitely know for, more seasoned teachers or older teachers who aren't as fluent with technology, that can be kind of difficult. Have, in relation to your child, your youngest one that you shared, you have a 9-year-old. Have you noticed like a big difference in their, I don't want to say addiction, but addiction to technology or the need to have it, be close to it versus your older students or your older children?
Yeah, yeah. Like, so one thing happened the other day where she doesn't have a cell phone or anything like that. But she has I have an old Samsung that has up all of her like baby pictures and all of the things
Hmm.
on it. and it had some games on it that she could play prior to her getting an iPad. And so she snuck it to school, but it was dead. Like there was
Mm.
no power in it because we hadn't used it. And a kid came up to my car at the bus stop and said, she has her phone. She was taking pictures of us, and I'm like, she doesn't even have a phone. And
Mm.
he goes, her book bag. And so she gets in the car, and I'm like, what phone do you have? And
Mm-hmm.
she's like, I was just playing. It's not even. It's dead. It's not even working. And I'm like, but
Yeah.
why did you take it? And she goes, and then the thing is, she goes, people were talking about me because I have a Samsung and not an iPhone. And I'm like, you're
Mm.
9. They don't. She goes, they do have an iPhone. I go, they shouldn't. Like, I'm like, they're 9. Like, all of the things. And but because that's one thing, because everybody else has it, she thinks she's supposed to have it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that even with parents now, like they're thinking like my kid has to have it because that's what they're supposed to have. And I grew up in a generation where I had a quarter in my pocket and I just had to find a payphone. And
Right.
I know time changed, and this, like I just mentioned, education has changed. I mean, things have changed, so education should. So I'm not saying we have to go back to that, but I am saying that we need to, think about the appropriateness of things that we're, allowing our
Yeah.
kids to have. And so, but she does, when she gets in the car, she's like, can I take my iPad? I'm like, no, you don't need it. Let's enjoy the scenery outside. Or she's like, if
Mm-hmm.
she has her iPad, there's no internet on it. And she's like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't, I don't have many games to play. And I'm like, you have 8 million games that you've downloaded. Like you can play them. Well, those
Yes.
are boring. You need the internet. I'm like, you don't need the internet. She's like, well,
Right.
I just want to get on YouTube, and I have to constantly monitor her because
Mm-hmm.
if she'll will be somewhere and then she'll ask someone for their Wi-Fi password, or somewhere we've been, and so the Wi-Fi password has been saved, and so she can get on. And I'm like, get off of YouTube. Like, oh my gosh. And even more so, the one thing that really stresses me too with technology and the advancement of it, or not even the advancement of it, the changing of it. Like we watch situational shows,
Mm-hmm.
that taught conflict resolution and that taught relationship building. And now they don't watch things like that. They just watch skits after skits and things and skits and POVs and all the things. And they're funny, but I'm like, okay, we got to turn that off now. We need to do some real life.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And man, I'm telling you, I feel like your daughter and my son would be best friends because they sound just alike. And I think that's what it is. And you made a great point about the type of content that they're watching. And that's the same thing I say to my kids. It's like you're sitting here watching people do things when you could be doing them one yourself, or you're literally like watching them play games when you have a whole game that you could be playing. It just drives me insane and I can't
Drives
stand
me
it.
crazy.
And that's why I'm like,
I'm like,
no,
you ever seen
YouTube.
her play with slime? Like, why
Yep.
can't you just play with the slime?
Can't you just no, but I want to watch somebody else do it. It's so interesting. We'll have to talk more on that too on another time because it's really interesting to me, like in what they're interested in, like and how did we get away from traditional TV shows and things like that. And even with my 11-year-old, I have to say get off of YouTube, and I'm kind of like now they're on a very short thread with YouTube.
Yeah,
It's only
me
certain
too.
things that they can watch, because YouTube it can be very dangerous if it's not monitored. And
Right.
just really getting them to engage or actually think about what they're watching, or if they are watching YouTube, like why do you choose to watch this and what do you get out of it? I'm not going to allow you to sit here and just watch garbage all day just to waste time. Like make it educational, learn from it, or follow instructions. Like my daughter's crocheting, crochet, learn
Yeah.
how to do something and utilize it as a tool and not just sit there and waste time. So I thank you for sharing that. I definitely was wondering on that, but I think that's kind of the
Yeah.
sentiment with all of the kids right now. And yes, that the Apple versus Android, never ending conflict.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
sorry, I'm an Android user, but I always get made fun of, but I always have been a Samsung person. But I definitely hear that too. And my son is like, he snuck one of a old phone of mine too to school and is like, oh, I just wanted to play with it because everybody, no, you don't need it. My 11-year-old
You
wouldn't
know,
have one either if her dad didn't give her one. You know what I mean? They don't need
yeah.
it. Who are they? They're
She
talking to the
she
same,
begs to take her iPad to school. She's like, please, then I can have something to do on the bus. I'm like, you don't need anything to
need
do on the
anything.
bus.
Talk to your
Just ride
friends.
the bus home. Talk to your
Play.
friends, or take a, I don't
Right.
know, but you
Take a
don't
nap.
need an iPad. I
Yeah.
even thought
Yeah.
about like when I was going through my doctoral program and writing my dissertation. That actually was the focus on utilizing social media and
Hmm.
to leveraging that in the classroom to use it as a tool for learning.
Yeah.
With the biggest focus of being it's not going anywhere. Like many
Right.
teachers are like, we're just going to cut them off. I'm like, Well, then what you're going to do is you're going to have a struggle because it's not going anywhere. You're going to be competing
Right.
constantly with what they're already using. And so
Right.
instead of competing it, engage it, bring it in and use it for the classroom. Teach them how to use it for a learning
Right.
tool. But to try
Absolutely.
to eliminate it, that's not going to happen.
Absolutely. And when I was teaching too, I would tell my students the same thing. You guys have your phones all day, but you actually have a computer at your hands all day, and you have unlimited access to anything
Mhm.
on the on the internet, and yet you guys choose to not even use your phone even as a tool and a valuable resource that you can utilize for your education. So I definitely have talked through all of these, and I try to get my own two kids to say it, but I feel like I'm
Came to my desk with the phone in their hand and said, "How do you spell something?" I said, "You have the entire World Wide Web in your hand." They're like, "What?" I go, "Never mind. Put it on my desk. Go get the dictionary." It's like, "No, no, no." I'm like, "Nope, nope, nope, nope.
yeah,
Put it on my desk
exactly.
and go get the dictionary."
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Oh, definitely. I would love to talk more on that with you, for sure. But parents, please, I know, and educators, yeah, I think the cell phones and the use of technology, like you said, it's not going anywhere. So how can we combat it in a peaceful way, like, but include it in education? Because again, it's good for them to know what they're utilizing. I think the other big important parts, especially those that are teaching like coding and teaching other like computer programming and things like that,
Yeah.
is I do tend to think that they're learning the concepts and how to function, work through it, but they actually don't get to learn and really fully understand like the actual access and what they have, and like the tools that they're learning, how valuable and how dangerous it could be, but also how resourceful it could be. So I definitely urge for anybody that teaches those types of programming, to really kind of dive deep into like the seriousness of if you misuse something the wrong way,
Mhm.
like social media, YouTube, all of these things, like give them the warnings of the consequences of technology, and as well as the utilization and the positive side of it too. So that's kind of like my spiel on that one.
Yeah. And I
um,
think the biggest thing that the biggest point with that too that I teach other people is it's important in order for people, not just children, but in order for them to really appreciate the tool, they need to understand the process. So
mhm,
like, we have a lot of children whose phones are all broken to pieces because they have no idea like what's the process, like what was the process of getting here. There was a
right,
time when these things did not exist. And so what's the benefit of having it? It's not
right,
just to talk and get on social media and all of the things. But also when we talk about deeper in the process, like because they have access to the entire world on social media and on these phones, they don't understand there's a process behind even success. And
mhm,
so they think that they're behind, or they think that they're not doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing, or they think something's wrong with them because they don't look like people who are
yeah,
their age. But they understand no one's posting processes. They're just
right,
posting the. And
right,
so being able, for any parents who are listening, it's important to help them to understand that. And young children, because their brain is not fully developed, their brain can't decipher between what's real and what's not real. And
mhm,
so when they see certain things on television and then they see the real world, they think something's wrong because they've seen these things on social media and no one is posting like the process of things.
absolutely,
And so being able to stop and talk to your children about, that can't happen. That's
right,
not real.
right,
And limiting those things until that's why I say, like, even developmentally appropriate, something that could seem kid friendly, just because it doesn't involve sex or drugs or violence, doesn't mean it's kid friendly because it eliminates their process thinking. Because then they don't understand all of that. And so then they
right.
don't have a realization or reality check. And so it's important to really monitor even in those areas.
Absolutely. Yeah, those critical thinking skills, I think that's what I'm most nervous about. Oh, geez, our kids are using it at such a younger age, that that critical thinking and that thought processing is kind of eliminated. Like they don't have to even do that anymore to enjoy certain things or to work through certain things. And so yeah, it's really intriguing. And so I definitely want to pick your brain more on that, on another conversation. So, kind of going into the next part, with your business, and so you talked about being strategic developer, developing consultant for mothers, and you have your consulting business. Explain a little bit about that and what you're doing there, and what types of resources do you share with the community?
Yeah. So at TL Collaborative, I'm very passionate about helping to empower moms. In that space, meaning that helping moms to discover their identity aside from who they are as a parent,
Hmm.
and who are they are as whether if they're in business, who they are aside from those, and being able to pull on their identity and their expertise and uh, what's the word I'm looking for? I just lost my train of thought with that. Their abilities and things that they do that are different than the talents. Goodness, I couldn't think of the word talents.
That's okay. Yeah, no
Pulling
problem.
on those areas to accomplish different things and live a thriving life and building relationships for those that they lead, whether it's their family, whether it's their organization, pulling on all of those things so that you're not stuck in your identity of what you do as a parent or what you do as a business person, but you are more so identifying who you are based on your talents and your gifts and then operationalizing those. And so I strategically plan with parents who may be looking for just building a specific task. So maybe you have a business idea and you need to take it from an idea to concept to making it a reality. Then I consult and coach through that, using and leveraging my expertise as doing operations, strategic planning, even doing that as a principal, and then being an educator, understanding how education and how learning happens. Doing those things, being a mom as
Right.
well, and how that what that looks like when you have to balance your mommying, um, and that also again building the relationships. How do you strategize and bring your family into that process so that you're not now stressed because you're separating people from there. There's other services that I offer, like if someone is looking to just strategize on developing habits that need to build strong relationships or habits based on a specific theme or focus of their life, professionally or personally, then I coach and consult through that as well. And then one of the biggest things that I do is helping to strengthen or fortify relationships between moms and daughters. And so that is a cohorted service where it is building on active listening and communication and doing it in a relaxed setting where it's not like taught and you're talking at and you're talking. It's really true relationship, authentic bonding. That is the whole goal with that is we want our daughters to come home and we want our daughters to talk to us when they don't have to. When they're young,
Right.
they kind of have to. But once
Yeah.
they get of age where they don't have to come back and they don't have to talk, we want to have those type of relationships where they do. And
Absolutely.
aside from that, because I am very passionate about um, girls with ADHD, because I'm raising a daughter who lives with ADHD, I'm
Hmm.
very passionate about supporting moms in those areas as well, but also supporting girls. And so my daughter's organization just launched birthday parties for ADHD girls where we're specifically focused on engagement in those different areas of characteristics. So we're looking at focus, we're looking at hyperactivity, and we're looking at affirmations of, what does it look like to, identify yourself and what it is that you struggle with or who
Yeah.
you are. And so we build on self care, identity, value in those areas,
Right.
mindfulness. And so we make sure that when the girl leaves the party, she understands and knows how to harness and leverage her superpower. Living with ADHD and knowing that nothing's wrong with her is just all about being able to recognize where her strengths are.
Nice. That's beautiful. My daughter too, my 11-year-old has ADHD, and that actually has been something that she struggles with a lot in relation to her reading comprehension and just focus in general in school. She definitely is a kid that's kind of in her own little world sometimes, and you got to get her out of there. So I'm definitely interested in looking at your resources and collaborating with you there. It's definitely beautiful to have these types of resources available to families. And as a parent, in experiencing these with our kids and kind of working through it with them, as on top of being an educator, you kind of have to advocate top notch like advocacy for your kid, and that's something that I've had to do all of my child's education, making sure that she has a 504 plan in place and making sure that she's getting those supports in her educational
Yeah.
system. But then talking through her, kind of woman to woman, as or young woman to woman, like this is what it looks like, even through adulthood, and how can you work through those struggles that you do have. But I love that you have that being able to identify it and work through that, and I think that's great. And you said that that was your daughter's business. You guys opened that together.
Yeah, well, the business is Tyler's Chronicles,
Mm-hmm.
and that is one that I started for girls with ADHD, and so that's where the parties are under there.
Nice.
And I think that it's important because one of the things that I want to say about that is for any parents that are listening is, and if your daughter is living with ADHD or you don't know, studies didn't come out until like the 80s for girls with ADHD. And when they did, they were classified with boy characteristics. And
Mm-hmm.
so if your daughter is struggling with depression or struggling with isolation or self identity, that it's important to get her tested because it shows up different in girls
Yeah.
because it doesn't show up as them, moving all around and doing all the things. A lot of girl ADHD is ADHD of the brain, and so their brain is hyper focused or hyperactive. It's not their
Mm-hmm.
body,
Right.
and because they can't focus, then it looks like they're not paying attention. Or sometimes people would say you're in the clouds, or you're ditzy, or you're just, you're
Yeah.
not paying attention. Those types of things, and that's not the case. And then they start to, self isolate or feel depressed because they can't quite get it. And so that's really important. But then also being able to be an advocate. And that's one area, even with parenting, I know we were talking about parenting, is the one thing that I've learned from being a parent and then being an administrator and also a teacher. And I said this as an administrator before, like when we talk about helicopter parents, but
Mm-hmm.
now having a different vantage point, advocating for your child and speaking up for your child is not a helicopter parent.
Right.
Don't ever feel afraid of like I have to be, who's going to speak up for them if they don't, if you don't.
Right.
And so empowering them to know, how to speak up for themselves or how to
Mm-hmm.
advocate for themselves in a respectful manner, but then
Mm-hmm.
also you being the one speaking up. If your child is struggling in an area, that's important for you to get the resources so that you understand how to communicate that. And if you're, collaborating with someone like myself, I do that, or someone else, or another educator friend. So many educators out here will say helicopter parent, and that turns a parent off, and they're like, I don't want to be a helicopter parent, so I'm not going to say anything. And that's not it. That's not
Yeah.
advocating for your child, is not being a helicopter parent.
Absolutely.
When a teacher sends home something about your child not doing something that they are not capable of doing, and you speaking up for that, that's not helicoptery. That is speaking up for your child. If they're incapable of doing
Mm-hmm.
something, then being reprimanded for something that they're truly incapable of doing is
Yeah.
not fair. It's like telling a kid who has one leg, they're not running fast enough, and you're like, they weren't really running like everybody else. So you're like, really?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I love that piece about, even your own child or student being able to speak up for themselves, because that's kind of one thing I've definitely empowered my daughter with. She's about to go into sixth grade, and, we even talked about how she's nervous. She's excited to go, but nervous at the same time because she does recognize that she has focus issues and sometimes can be a little bit behind. And the one thing that I will know is she knows how to advocate for herself. It's just reminding her, like, hey, do you know that you're supposed to get these types of graphic organizers, or you're supposed to get a little bit of extra time on a test, or you're supposed to, just reminding her of what her own accommodations are through her 504 plan. Because sometimes teachers, they just have a lot going on and may not remember, or they just choose not to follow that 504 plan. And so I definitely have really encouraged my daughter to speak up for herself. Like, it's not, it doesn't look bad on you, for you to say, hey, go to the side and say, hey, I actually need X, Y, and Z because I'm entitled to it. And so I love that. Again, yeah, those types of conversations, it's really important. And yes, I have no shame in my game. My kids, teachers, they know that I'm an educator, and they know that, that I will remind her, like, hey, she actually is supposed to have counseling one-to-one with a counselor, as per stated in her 504 plan. So can we get back on track, with that? And sometimes we just have to say what is necessary, just to ensure that our kids can kind of get in a good routine and be on track with those 504 plans too. So I definitely get that there for sure. So within your business, and anything else that you're doing in the education world, because you're still educating, it's just kind of in a different platform. What area do you find, or do you feel in the world of education is something that we should focus on, maybe from a parent's lens, or an educator's lens? Like, what do you think are some key areas that need to really be focused on to help better the system for our children?
Um, I think as a parent and then also being a teacher and an administrator, one of the biggest things that I would communicate to parents, and I do communicate to parents, is looking at education as a co-parenting situation. You send your kids off for 8 hours with other adults to raise them, and then they come back home. And so approaching that relationship as a co-parenting, understanding that, for the most part, teachers have the best interest in heart. And it's really hard out there for teachers like right now, especially with all of the turnover and all of those types of things that are going on. That doesn't give a pass for anyone to not do what they're supposed to do, but giving some grace and understanding that.
Yeah.
But then also from the teachers that are listening, understanding that you went to school for this, for those that went to school. And so you've gotten, some training and some development for working with children. Parents, all we got was a birth certificate and a child. They didn't get any training for it. And so they're looking at teachers as being the expert of how do you raise a child. And so one of the things I always laugh at, like when my daughter's doing something or something, and if a teacher just met me and they don't know I'm a teacher yet, or someone says like, "Hey, can you talk to her?" I'm always laughing because I'm like, I I've not mastered it in 9 years. I was really hoping that you could give me some tips and some tools, because I have no idea. If I knew, she wouldn't be doing that thing. But just really being able to have grace for one another, because you are co-parenting a child. Having open communication, that you're not going to get anywhere by pretending something's not happening,
Yeah.
or asking those questions and being really honest and transparent about things, on both sides. And then also just enjoy it. Like, laughter is good for the soul. And so if a child is doing something that we all know is crazy, like, don't come like with your mama bear suit on, like, "Oh, my kid." Like, if we know our kids, like when the teacher tells me
Yeah.
something about my kid, I'm not like, "I never think that." Like, yeah, same thing I saw. Like,
Mhm.
did it work for you? Like, what happened for you today? And being able to have a good laugh about it, because that's our kid. Like, we really are raising our kid together. And so that also means just supporting one another in whatever that looks like, that support looks like, being engaged if something, and that engagement also looks different. So you
Right.
may not be the parent that can go to every event and everything at the school, but engagement can look like, you just shooting a little note to the teacher to ask, like, is there anything that, I need to be aware of? Or, hey, just shooting, happy Friday, or sending a little note in your bag to with your kid just to let the teacher know that they were being thought of, or buying a piece of candy or whatever. Doesn't
Yeah.
always have to be money, but just having that. And also the other thing about not being a helicopter parent and having that communication, don't feel like as a parent, like if your child had a rough night or something's going on, shoot that teacher a little note to give them a little heads up, so that then you're not getting like they were having a rough night. They did this in school, so the teacher can have a lens of saying, okay, you got up in
Yeah.
the middle of the night, or things were a little crazy at home, or you guys are moving or whatever. So now the teacher knows, oh, this child is dealing with something else
Hmm.
today. And so they're going to be in rare form. And so just open communication, grace, family engagement. That's what that looks like. It's not always
Yeah.
coming to the carnival or coming to open
Right.
house. The family engagement means like truly understanding it's a co-parenting situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was greatly put together. Put like I definitely that concept of co-parenting, as a co-parent myself with my ex-husband, and then I definitely see that alignment. But again, yeah, the family engagement piece is huge. And like you said, it's not just the simple come to the parent teacher conferences or the other annual events. It's like actually take that time. And I think a lot of times a lot of us think we're inconveniencing a teacher, or the teacher were inconveniencing the parent to like communicate. But it's important because like you said, it's if they did have a rough night, if something is going on, it is important for them to know. And I think there's a stigma of sometimes it's like, oh, what happens in our house stays in our house, like the schools don't need to know. But there are a lot of resources, there are a lot of supports if you actually ask for
Right.
those supports, and for families to be a little bit more transparent sometimes with the schools, especially if they have a school that they feel safe in and they can confide
Yeah.
in certain things and get that support. But it's definitely important. And I think something that you said that I never thought of it that way is that we are as educators, and those of us that have been formally trained through education program in a higher education institution, we do learn a lot more about the development of children and the milestones. And unless us as parents like actually read the books that, when we're pregnant, or, as a mother and father, like of these things that we do learn in an educational program, they don't know these. And I am like, oh wow, like I never like really thought about that. Like, yes, like educators should be the ones that do know a little bit more, in a sense, especially if you're a veteran teacher, like, at this age, this is what these kids are doing. So kind of advocate that and speak that with those parents. And I think that's an interesting concept I've not yet heard. And so thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that.
No
So
problem.
where can the guests find you on social media? Feel free to share your pages, and then anything else, resources that you want to share for our guests to connect with you with.
Awesome. And so on my personal page, my main page is at Dr. T. Wiggins, where I post a lot of inspirational things and things that are going on with the business. That's one spot to engage. I can be also found on the business page. That's TL_collaborative, where I post information about events, webinars, different things that are also happening with the business. And then if you're in the Charlotte, North Carolina area and you're listening, there is Tyler's Chronicles, which is the ADHD focused girls mobile parties. That is mobile.
Nice.
We do travel there. I can also be found on LinkedIn, Tawana L. Wiggins, where also I post information and inspiration, a lot of faith-based information, as I am a Christian woman. So a lot of those things filter through that area as well. And so, yeah, if you're a mom and you're looking for empowerment and resources, you can also reach out to me there. And if you're in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, there's also events that happen, Empowering Her to Thrive events. And we focus on various topics like being able to harbor your talent and build things that you're looking to build, whether it's writing a book, whether it's opening a business. One that's coming up recently, more recent, is Empower Her to Feel, which is really focusing on your emotions and understanding that we are emotional as humans, and what does that look like being authentic and showing up in spaces with our true authentic selves. And so that's the focus, and the framework is about empowering her to thrive. And there's various things that happen around that framework. And so you can reach out to me in all of those spaces, and my website is on all of those social media sites as well.
And I'll be sure to tag all of that in the comments too for everybody. And if I was in North Carolina, I definitely would be coming to some of those events. So I'll be paying attention to your social media and some things that you share there. You definitely share a lot of resources, so I appreciate that. And thank you so much for all you do in the world of education. Is there any last thing to get off your chest, or words of wisdom that you'd like to share with anybody watching?
I think the only thing would be is communication is key in every aspect of what you're doing, whether it's education, whether it's relationships, being able to just really be authentic and transparent in your communication and building those relationships. And transparency and authenticity looks different depending on the relationship. And so it's not all about divulging all of your business and all of your history of things, but it is being honest. And so when you're having a conversation, no matter what, just have that honesty so that you can be able to break barriers and make changes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I 100% agree. That's literally how I am all the time. So I appreciate that. So again, everybody, I will be sure to comment or post in the comments, excuse me, Dr. Tawana Wiggins contact information. And please be sure to like, follow, and share myself, Kylie Elizabeth, the Virtual Educator, and Dr. Tawana Wiggins. And you guys all have a great night. Thank you so much.